we incubate missions in our local church. And oftentimes the perception is you need a big church to have a missions department, like a robust one. But if you wait until you have a big church to have a robust missions department, you're like many years too late. It's got to be built in early on, otherwise it feels like too big of a task or a sacrifice. And so Tom's done this a few times already. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you. Is this on? No? Should I turn it on?
Yeah. Just up.
As a liberal arts major, translate Homer, but we good? There you go. Now, you said, what am I speaking on? Missions at the heart of the local church, right? Oh, okay, good. I thought you said something different. Okay, my name's Tom Llewellyn. I have a wife named Laura who couldn't be with me today. Laura and I met when we were 15 at the lunchroom at Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We got married when we were 21, and we've been married. We've had 46 and a half wonderful years together. We just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary recently, so you can put that together as you would like. We have 4 grown children, 7 grandchildren, some of them live far away and some close. Our story is that when we graduated, when my wife graduated from college, we went on the staff of Campus Crusade for Christ 50 years ago this next month. And we traveled out to Arrowhead Springs, where Bill Bright lived, who was the founder, and we all had dinner with him and that sort of thing. And that was a great experience for a couple of years. Later, we started a church. We moved to where we live now in Michigan, which was near where we grew up in Ann Arbor. And from a group of 22 adults, we started a church. Now, we were not starting from another church. We had gathered a number of people who drove to churches farther away because of some kinds of churches that I'd spoken in. And so we were kind of starting from scratch with 22 adults and 18 children. In 1984, we had the great experience of starting officially. Some businessmen I knew bought a 100-year-old church building, 100 years in 1984, old, little tiny clapboard congregational church, and it was a great place to start. They say after a year we went to 2 services, which sounds so impressive, but the whole building was about a third of the size of this room, so that wasn't quite as impressive as it sounds. And through the years, I was the lead pastor there for 37 years, retired in 2020. Through the years, we planted 2 other churches, and I felt when I retired that if I really loved God's church, and particularly that church that we've been a part of, what I needed to do was, to the degree that I was able, I should try to help the church make a transition to a new pastor without falling apart. Oftentimes, churches that have a founding pastor that stays have a great deal of difficulty in the next generation. And the church, I felt like I should not designate who was going to take my place. The elders and congregation needed to make that decision. And they eventually chose my associate pastor, who was a young man who'd grown up in the church. His parents had helped us start the church. And, I would say, to be real honest, of all the things I've done, I feel really good about what happened. He has done such a phenomenal job. The church has changed, obviously. And the way that I really feel he's done a good job is that the one thing he carried on, I don't care about a lot of things. There's a lot of things you can change, and it doesn't mean that the previous generation was wrong or anything like that. But what they did is, first, Paul, his name is, he wanted to build a building that would be like a community center, sort of a gymnasium. And we could really use that at that church. been a great idea, but he did a survey, the elders did a survey of the congregation, and a number of people came back and said, we don't really want to build a building. And it was only, when I say a number, it was maybe 25% of the congregation, it wasn't the majority, but they said, we don't really want to build a building, we'd like to plant another church. And he called me and talked to me about the first time we planted a church. It was so hard. It took so many years to convince people who, they were about, church was 14 years old when we planted the first one. And people loved each other and they didn't want to lose their friends and all those things, which I understand. That's a part of it, but the kingdom is going to be the time when we're all together. That's not what this, the church age is for. And so finally got people to start a church. And I said, man, if you've got people saying they want to see the church do that, I'd go for that, and they did. And so we planted a church, and my wife and I went with it, so now I'm in the, I don't know if it's an enviable or sorrowful position of starting a new church. I was 29 when we first started. I'm 72 years old now, and those young people don't know what they're doing, and some of them I don't even like very much. And we're planning this new church, but it's been kind of it's like a full circle experience of having started something in the previous generation, coming around and now being a part of, and really being more grandpa, to be honest, to many of the people who look at me that way, a few of whom grew up in our church, and I've known them since they were small. One woman who leads music, I have a picture of her in a sandbox with my daughter when they were both 4 years old, and they're both 46 now. So, there's a lot of changes, but it's been quite an experience doing that. And now I'm in the process of thinking, how do you start missions in a new church? When I did it before, we didn't even start thinking about missions for 7 years because we had to get something established. But when you start a church from a church, they come with all kinds, at least the core group, comes with all kinds of expectations of what they would like to see happen, memories of what the mother church did and all of that, some of which annoy me because I was the one who put those things in place, and now I don't really like them telling me, we have to do it the same way or something. But it really is an interesting experience. So I think Altine mentioned that we sent a team there, and it was the first time, because we're starting this new church, that we have kept some of our student ministries together briefly, like we're about to split it off, just because we're going to have trouble with the teenagers we were bringing with us to keep things going very much. We could rely a bit on the mother church to help us do that, and now we're going to be going off on our own. And the same with missions. We kept our missions team together, and it's been a good experience before we can split off and do our own things. But I'm in a position now of thinking, how do you start missions in a church that has some expectations of missions, because they've seen it happen before, the things that happen. So I thought I'd speak for a few minutes on keeping missions at the heart of a local church. Some thoughts on how do you do that over a period of time? What kind of things do you need to concentrate in order for that to continue to be an important part of the heart of what a local church is about? I'm from a background where you have to have a text in order to stand up in front of people. So even though I'm not going to refer to this in great depth, I have to read a passage of scripture, and please, allow me to do this because my ancestors are rising up in my mind about to say something. But actually, yesterday, Mike referred to this passage very appropriately and correctly, Acts chapter 1, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. Well, that verse, particularly verse 8, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the end of the earth, is, as Mike mentioned, that's the outline of the book of Acts. I mean, that's exactly what unfolds as you read through the book of Acts. And the thing I'd like to add on to that is that's not only the outline of the book of Acts, it's in a sense the mandate of what we're all about, is that each of us are a part of, must be a part of individual local churches, But those individual local churches have as our function to go from Jerusalem, our own place, to Judea and Samaria, to the ends of the earth. That's what we're all about. You can think of those, as 4 different regions. You've got Jerusalem, your home location, right around where you live, the people you're seeking to draw into discipleship, and then Samaria, which was half Jewish and half Gentile, and in my understanding, which not everyone agrees with this, but it was, when the gospel went to Samaria, it was the reuniting of Israel and Judah, of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, the northern kingdom having become Samaria, which was a mixed Gentile-Jewish area with, from the Jewish perspective, those who founded the first churches, from their perspective, Samaria was kind of a mongrel group of people that had a sub-form of Judaism. And when they became reunited, that's when the gospel really took off. And then going, of course, to the Gentiles and to the ends of the earth. And we have that function as churches. So really, we're all a part of a local ministry in which we're seeking to draw in people from the community around us, bring them to faith in Christ and to discipleship. And we're also a part of a region, you might say, an area that is larger than us, our church. And one of the ways we can do that is by cooperating with various groups in order to help our region, which can be done both socially. In our area, we have a ministry that deals with about 3 large townships that distributes funds. And so we eventually hooked ourselves in with them very closely, where we could help people within our immediate Jerusalem who were needing money to, pay electric bills and lot rent if they're living in a mobile home, and things like that. And it became very helpful. And in that way, we are cooperating with a large number of churches, including Catholic churches, Lutheran churches. I mean, when it comes to social ministry, we kind of forget all the fine-tuning of Christian doctrine that we care about ourselves and should, but and so we're all involved in something that is regional. Obviously, if you're in a denominational church, you have more contacts in that sense in a regional area that you're involved in. If you're Presbyterian, like Mike and some of the brothers here, you obviously have a presbytery where you're a part of governing all the churches in your area in certain ways. So, we're all a part of that, but we're also responsible to be going to the ends of the earth. And the question becomes, how do we focus on that, like all 3 of those things, without over-focusing on one? Obviously, if you think about the local church, that needs to be our primary focus. A professor said, in very memorable terms, if Christianity doesn't work at home, don't export it. And that's true for a church, too. If it's not working within your local family of Christians, it's real hard to have a broader ministry that's going to be very meaningful. And so that needs to be our primary focus. But the fact is, if we do that to the exclusion of, let's say, the other side, the ends of the earth, then we're also missing something. Why is that? Because the people within our congregation need to become disciples who focus on the ends of the earth. That's what Christianity is all about. If you don't have a world focus, you're at least not fully being discipled in the way that you need to be. That's a part of what it means to be a disciple, as well as living a moral life and reading your Bible regularly and the things that we can concentrate on within the home. It's like if you're a parent, and I have 4 children, they're older now, but as you're raising children, the fact is that is your primary focus. If it doesn't work there, it's real hard for you to do anything else. But let's say you say, I'm going to be a father or a mother of this family. That's what I'm doing in life. And you don't go out into the world and get a job, you're not going to be able to do this. I mean, you have to have a job in which you're interacting with people outside of the family in order to adequately raise children who themselves will support themselves and care for themselves. So it's a simple illustration, but we have to be doing all of these things. And how do you maintain all of those emphases? Let's just say the local emphasis, the regional emphasis, and the world emphasis. how do you maintain those in the proper balance, at the proper way? In other words, how do you keep missions at the heart of the local church? Well, just a few thoughts on that. The first one is so simple, I almost hesitate to say it, because once I say it, you'll say, well, that's so obvious. It's like the only way you can do it is by making the focus of your ministry the Great Commission. That's what we were told to do. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing and teaching. Okay, if your local family of Christians, your local church, if your primary focus is on making disciples, if that's what you're trying to do, if you measure the effectiveness of what you're doing by making disciples, not by building buildings, unless building buildings contributes to making disciples, it's kind of a worthless endeavor, right? You know, not on having programs, big programs, unless somehow your programs contribute to making disciples, you need to cut them out, stop doing them. That just seems kind of obvious, but it's very hard to do, you find, when you're in a church for a long period of time. The only way you can really maintain a proper emphasis is to have the proper emphasis of the heartbeat, and then all you're doing is doing that in different ways, in different areas. If your focus is on evangelism and discipleship as a local church, with the families that God gives to you and those who you draw, nudge towards Christ, if that's what your focus is, then all the regional ministry and world ministry is doing the same thing in a different setting, you know, focusing in a different area. And if churches fail, it's usually fail, at least in God's eyes, it's usually because they focus only on the local ministry. You know, they focus on themselves and internally growing, developing, being a good, healthy church, and then they don't focus on ministering outside of themselves and ministering in regions farther away. So again, the Great Commission literally says going or as you go, make disciples. That's the only imperative in the passage. Make disciples, baptizing them and teaching them. So the way we make disciples is by going, which is preaching the gospel, baptizing and teaching. And it's an ongoing process that we go through with children as they're growing up and so forth. And I'm saying, you know, I'm speaking to the choir, we're all part of churches, we know what that means. But really the only way to maintain a proper emphasis is to build it into the core of the church, and then all you're doing is applying it in different areas. You know, I happen to have been on Crusade staff a long time ago, and I knew Josh McDowell as a student. He came to Michigan State, and I was assigned to be the one to pull off something that he was doing on campus that year, and it was the biggest crowd he'd ever spoken to. This was 1973, and Josh is a very interesting person. He's very old now, and do you even know who I'm talking about? You know, because I realized not everybody even knows who Josh McDowell is or was. But, you know, the interesting thing is he told a story, and I never forgot it, and I did it. He said when he went to seminary, and I think he went to Talbot Seminary in California in the 60s, he said, I would go to study in the library, and I carried with me a world map. And when I was young, we didn't have phones or anything like that. We had these things called daytimers. So you know, it was like a little book that you used, it had rings on it, different sizes. And in the back it had a world map, mine did. And he said I would go into the library, and the first thing I'd do is I'd take that map out and I'd set it up in front of me. And as I studied, I'd see it, and I reminded myself, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm studying Hebrew grammar, you know, or whatever, biblical theology. I'm doing it for the world. And I did that. When I went to seminary, I did exactly the same thing. I don't mind saying that I stole it from someone who was better and, not better looking, but better than I was. And, you know, I think that has to be built into what you're trying to do. It's really, all we're seeking to do is fulfill the Great Commission in the different spheres that are given to us in the commission as it's recorded in the book of Acts. You know, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. So that's the first point. Obvious one, but if you don't build on that, you're not going to get anywhere. The second one is this. As a church progresses, you have to keep working to keep the leaders of the church on the same page about what we're talking about. Whether it's local ministry, regional ministry, world ministry, you have to work really hard to keep the leaders on the same page. Having the same vision, the same heartbeat, that takes a lot of work for those who are leading churches, for elder teams to seek to be on the same page about things. We did that in a number of ways. I think I shared it a different one of these. I'll just say it briefly. You know, the real turning point in terms of starting and building a church for us was about 9 years into our experience. No, it was longer than that. It was 12 years into our experience. Gregor Menga, whose picture was shown yesterday by Brian, was a person I knew, and he came to America for the first time in 1995, and he traveled around and met people, and he ended up staying with us for a couple of weeks in Michigan. And you know, he was young and had hair at that time, and he talked about what was going on in Albania. Communism had just fallen in 1991. Things were a mess. They were a mess, as in most post-communist countries. They were a mess for 10, 12 years or so before things started to settle down. I mean, when I say a mess, I mean shootings regularly, uprisings, you know, things like that going on. It wasn't just the economy wasn't functioning well. That was true, but it was much worse than that, you know. And I remember having this sense, and I am not the kind of person that feels like God leads me every moment of everything I'm going to do, but this was one of the maybe 2 or 3 experiences in my life where I felt very strongly this is what God wants me to do. I remember him sitting there talking. There were maybe 50 of us sitting in the room, and we're thinking about missions, and included many of the leaders of the church. And he was talking, and I had this sense I should take all the elders to Albania. Now, at that time, nobody traveled to Albania. I mean, there were people going. Missionaries had gone in as soon as communism fell and things had happened. But I mean, like, we decided to spend the next 9 months planning a trip to Albania, and we got the men of the church. We were doing some men's meetings or something on Saturday morning to help us do that. And so we'd have men come to meetings, and they'd say, I was riding on a train the other day going to some business thing, and I sat next to a guy, and he was Albanian. And I told him, you know, we're going to send our elders to Albania. And he said, oh, you got to talk to this person. You got to do this. It's going to be hard for some of you, but there weren't cell phones. People didn't even have phones in their homes in Albania. So it was like, to set something up was writing letters and wondering how long, you know, it would take to get back. And we set up this trip, and it's what changed us from being a young church to at least a teenage church where we were starting to look towards maturity and thinking about doing something for God. All of these elders up until that point had listened to me and done what I said, which makes ministry really easy. And I wish it always worked that way, but I knew it wasn't right. You can't build a church on what one person wants to do, particularly me. Like, I knew that wasn't a wise thing to do. I needed guys that, not that didn't like me, but were willing to step in and say, I'm not sure we should do this. Why do you think we should do this? Or that even came with their own ideas and said, I think, you know, based on what's happened, we need to go this direction. And all of my easy life changed after I took them to Albania. These guys who were mostly young Christians, around my age at that point, 30s or so, they, we came back and things really changed. And not badly. It's not like they stopped me from doing things, but, you know, they stepped up and became leaders. And what I realized a few years later was now we're adding elders to the elder board. Now we've lost elders who planted a church, and we've got holes, and people are stepping off because they're moving away. Or we've got 3 or 4 people on the elder board who don't remember that. Like, remember the Pharaoh who didn't know about Joseph, and he arose in Exodus chapter 1. So, it's like you have to continue to do it. So I would say, one of the things I did was I made it my ambition to take every one of the elders to Albania with me on a trip so that they all were exposed to the people who were there, to new churches, to a very different culture. And that was very fruitful. Now, in our church, and churches do this differently, but we have an unwritten rule. It's not a policy. We violated it one time, and it was fruitful at that time for a specific reason, but our unwritten rule is we draw our elders from the small group leaders, and we require our elders to be small group leaders, which I have trouble with because I know I'm dealing with, I'm not doing it anymore directly, but you know, we have guys who are working all week, taking care of a family, and coming to elders meetings and making important decisions, discussing things, and we're expecting them, not just me, it was a group decision, it always has been, we're expecting them to lead small group. But one thing we found is if they're not leading a small group, they become CEOs of a corporation. That's a tendency. They can make those decisions the church needs to make, but they don't have a heart for the people. But if they're having to deal with the people every week or two, you know, helping them to grow and be discipled and so forth. So because we draw our elders from the small group leaders, we also made it our ambition to try to get all of our small group leaders to go with us on trips as we went over there. And that again, it's just, that becomes an ongoing thing because you're always gaining new small group leaders and losing others, gaining new elders, you know, and so forth, staff members, that kind of thing. So I would say, you know, not only does the main focus of evangelism and discipleship need to be built into the very heart of what you're about, so that everyone knows that. We are here to win, build, and send people into the ministry, even if they stay in their local area and all that kind of thing. But you need to keep working on always bringing everyone up to speed with what your ministry is about. The thing that goes along with that is to, I guess I'd make this point number 3, but not only keep working on your side, taking the important people, elders, staff, you know, to the mission field, allowing them to go on teams and on trips to accomplish something, but vice versa becomes true, and this is more true now than it was when I first started doing these things. You need to introduce your missionaries to your people now, which wasn't happening 20 years ago. Now we have been mostly involved in Albania. More about that in a few moments, but we've been mostly involved in Albania. So, you know, we have Albanian missionaries coming over here every year. That wasn't the case in the past. So, you know, now that I see, oh, this is going to happen every year, we're going to have some of those people are going to be here. One of the things we did at Grace, and we're doing it now at Redemption Story Church, it's called the church I'm a part of, is when we have people come over, we try to get them into every one of our small groups, which can't always be done, but we try to do that. So the small group gets to interact with them. We've kind of helped them to think through what is something they could show, kind of like what people have done here when they've showed up. You know, video that tells about their ministry, like Samir did, that would be a good example. You know, to show it to our people. We ask them not to use it to directly raise money, you know, with the individual small groups, although we don't mind if people support them. I mean, we would love to see that happen. We just don't want to make small groups feel like all they want to do is come and raise money from us. But what we do it is have people come and we tell the missionaries, get everybody's email that you can in every group that you go to and put them on your email list and start sending them letters so that they hear about what you're doing over a period of time. Then what's most fruitful, if that, they're coming here and people get to know them, recognize them. If we talk about them on Sunday morning or show their picture, many people at least have seen them in a group. You know, they've met them in the lobby or something. They're not just far away and here's a person you've never met before. It is, we also seek to send our people over there, and the people who become most committed, I can say from experience, is people that have met them, like in their small group or when they speak on a Sunday morning, and they've been to their, you know, ministry field and they've done something, done a vacation Bible school or on English-speaking nights, you know, we've done at times there, or done a retreat for married people in a church or whatever. When those 3 things happen, they put those together, they become supportive of what's going on. We don't have to tell them to be supportive. It's like they now are connected with real people they want to be a part of what they're doing and so forth. So, you know, I think you need to introduce your missionaries to your small groups. And then the last one is to take trips. And that maybe should have been said earlier, but I mean, it's like part of what it means to connect people to those on the field and to connect them in real ways is to take them there. Americans particularly are very insular. Part of it is that we are a huge country that has no need to go outside of ourselves. You know, I always have to remember when I go to one of the Balkan countries, these countries are only about as big as some of the smaller states in the United States. That's just the reality, you know. And so I live in a country that is huge, and I don't know any other language except biblical languages, which I can read. I don't know any other languages because I never had to learn one. And I feel bad for that. I really feel it's a detriment to Americans if we don't know other languages. But I also feel like, why would I need to learn another language? Why would most Americans need to learn another language? So I'm not defending it, I'm just saying that's reality. When you take an American to a field, they may have been overseas on a sightseeing trip, they may have been over there on business, oftentimes, you know, adults, but they've never been over there and stayed in somebody's home that's from a completely different culture. And it's like a life-changing experience for Americans to do that. And it expands their understanding of what's important. And I can think of so many people like my beloved father-in-law, a devout Catholic man. He's gone now, many years ago, but you know, I was very close to him. And when we first went to Albania, we had little children, and we asked them to take care of 2 of them, and my parents took care of 2 of them. And he said, "Why are you going to Albania? Aren't there enough non-believing people here in America that you can deal with them?" And he was just saying, as he was wont to do, he was just he said what went through his mind annoyingly at times. You know? He was just saying what I realized since then. People think all the time, why are you going over there? Why? Because it expands their understanding of what's important in life, how small we are, how we don't learn languages, and we can understand why, but the fact is, if you live in most European countries, you have to speak at least 2 languages. It's just required because you're interacting with, you know, people from different language groups. So I think, you know, taking trips is important. Now, having said all that, I want to say what is so difficult is to keep an emphasis that is appropriate. If new people coming into a church, all they hear is every week something about missionaries, they may be interested in that, but they're likely to feel, I really want to know what I'm going to get out of being a part of this church. And I don't think that's inappropriate. I mean, I think it is inappropriate. It's so consumer-driven, but I don't think the basic feeling is wrong. It's like, if you're going and looking at churches, of course you want to know, what's this church going, how's it going to help me? What is there going to be for my children? So that needs to be the main focus, but there needs to be a continual recognition. And what we chose to do is make it the 3rd Sunday of the month, which I don't think anyone at the church ever knew that it was the 3rd Sunday, you know, because they weren't counting in their heads, but we made it the 3rd Sunday so that we would always on the 3rd Sunday try to include a short video message from one of our missionaries, which now, compared to 30 years ago, you tell them to take it on your iPhone and send it to us. It's like, that's very easy to do. And even if it's only 2 minutes, people get to see them. We speak for 2 minutes about what we're doing over there and how we're going to send a team next year or something. And it's like, it's not talking every single week about something that many people need to be drawn into, like my father. But it's not ignoring the fact that the world is our field. Say that in the Gospel of John. The field is the world, it says in John chapter 11. So, you know, you really have to think about, how do we make this a proper emphasis that doesn't wear people out, especially because you're dealing with people that need to be brought into the fullness of what discipleship and how to move them forward. Now, just in closing, let me mention, we're kind of in an interesting, I feel I'm in an interesting position. It's been so fascinating to help to start a new church, having done it when I was a child, age 29, and having done it at a time when Willow Creek was the big thing. And I did some church planting study at a place that Brian was familiar with in Prospect Heights in 1983. And one of the things we did was we went to Willow Creek a number of times. And when we started, we kind of used some of their things. We did dramas and stuff, and it really worked at that time. Now, we later realized that's not the direction, what kind of church we're going to be, and we moved a different direction. But I started at that time. I started at a time when if people visited your church on Sunday morning, you could show up on Tuesday evening, which we did every week, at every person who visited the church, and we just knocked on their door cold and said, hey, we were from Grace Church, or Grace Countryside Church, as we were called at that time, and you visited on Sunday, and we just wanted to thank you for coming. And you know, there are always people who, I remember they would stand in the doorway and not let you in, and sort of silently were communicating, I'm not really happy that you showed up here, but I'm not unkind. But that was a tiny sliver of people who were like, most people was like, oh yeah, thanks for coming, come on in, let's have a cup of coffee, and we'd sit and talk for an hour. You can't do that today. I was also on crusade staff at the time, and you could walk up and down dorm hallways and knock on doors and talk to people about Jesus. And nobody reported you to the police department. Staff on college campuses can't do that. They used to, in most places, at least not in Michigan universities. So what I'm finding is that things have changed so much that instead of being what I thought I was going to be, which was the mentor of all these young people to tell them how to really do it, I hate to be blunt, but without really think about it, that's kind of what I was thinking. I'm going to be able to share all the wisdom that I've gained through all these years. Instead of being that, I've realized I'm in a position of trying to even understand what these young people are about who are starting the church. And, like AJ was saying, and figure out how do I assist them to do what they need to do in the culture in which they find themselves. It isn't knocking on doors on Tuesday evening. That's not going to be what it is. But what is it going to be? Because the underlying principles and needs don't change. You have to make contact with people and have some kind of meaningful communication with them to move them from sitting in a chair on a Sunday morning to being a part of other settings in which they're going to grow and learn and be discipled. So I'm figuring out how to do that. And one thing I really delight in, and I don't say this because of my, I've loved being involved in the Balkans. It's kind of the door that God opened for me miraculously. It wasn't anything that I did, and I just followed it. But now as a young church, we're trying to figure out what should we do with missions. Now we're separating even our missions emphasis from the mother church. And thankfully, it's been the mother church has taken their missionaries, and they're going to go and help them. We're not responsible for those missionaries, at least we aren't as a church. So we're going to work together over the next few years, figuring out what should we be involved in terms of the world. And maybe it'll be in the Balkans. I don't know. I'm not precluding anything, but maybe it'll be in different areas. We'll find ourselves drawn to be involved in some needy area in the world. So that's my thoughts. You have to be continually working to let people know missions is the heart of your church. The truth is, the mission is the heart of the church. The mission of making disciples is the only reason we exist. Glorifying God, worshiping forever. There's obviously more than that. But I mean, in terms of our horizontal responsibility, that's the one Jesus gave to us. Go and make disciples. And if you build that into just the basic, what you're seeking to do, what you are doing as an individual, what others are doing, it becomes a part and needs to be then maintained in various ways, a part of how that happens in a broader sense. I have no idea if I went way over or way under, but I kind of ran out of things to say, and
It was perfect.